Good evening, dear English Without Borders followers and all those who have joined us on Zoom and Facebook. We are very happy to resume English Without Borders webinars in January, and last week we had Fyodor Piruskakroev, and today we are very excited to host Jane George, and she will be talking about how to use information gap activities to increase student speaking skills. Welcome, Jane. So happy to see you. And let me introduce our speaker. Jane George has bachelor's, master's, and professional diplomas in English as a second language and English literature from the University of Hawaii, Manoa. Jane George taught adult ESL in Japan, Massachusetts, Hawaii, and Rhode Island. From 1999 to 2019, she taught ESL in public schools in Rhode Island. And she is a founding member of the State Professional Association, Rhode Island Teachers of English Learners, and served on its board. Jane George was an English language fellow in Tajikistan from 2017 to 2018, and she worked at the Tajik State Pedagogical University and the American Space in Dushanbe. Her teaching focus was communicative techniques that would enhance lessons and improve student skills. And as a specialist, Jane George conducted 4 one-week professional development workshops with teachers in Lebanon. So Jane, welcome to English Without Borders once again, and we are very happy to see you. And people are joining the English Without Borders webinars through Zoom and Facebook, and we welcome dear participants, your questions in the chat box. I will pass them over to Jane as soon as she completes her presentation. And now, Jane, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody. And as they say where I live now, aloha kakahiaka. That means good morning in Hawaiian. I live in Hawaii right now, and it's in the middle of the ocean. And right now it's in the middle of the night. It's 3:03 a.m. So you're about to go off and have your dinner. And I'm gonna, as soon as we're done, I'm gonna go take a nap because it's very early. Anyhow, Tajikistan, it's really nice to be talking to all of you. I'm sorry that you're just names, but I get it. We're going to do a very short webinar, and I hope it gives you some ideas about things that you can do in your classrooms with your students. These things do not take much time. And once you make these things, you have them forever and you can use them again and again. There is some requirement that you have some technology so that you can get the resources, but you don't need to use technology in your classroom with your students. Okay, so I suppose I will start sharing my screen. I made a PowerPoint presentation to show you, and most of what is, well, yes, at the very end, I've included a Padlet that has links to millions of websites where you can get resources. And with no further ado, I will share, and let's see if I can do this right. Ha ha ha. Yes, whoops. Nope, hold on a minute. Hold on. Yes. Okay, we are cooking with gasoline here. Okay, so let me, nope, it doesn't matter. Whoops. So this is the title of this presentation, Information Gap Activities to Get Students Talking. It's a little different from the title in the poster, but it's the same idea. And by the way, before we go any further, I need to tell you that I have a cat. His name is Teddy. And when he gets up in the morning, which would be now, he wants to eat his breakfast, but it's much, much, much too early for his breakfast. And so I gave him a little snack, but he might decide to come and join us. So if he jumps up on the desk where I'm working, he will be part of this webinar, just so you know. Okay, so moving along. So today's goal, there's only one goal today, and that is to introduce new ideas to you teachers that will get your students talking more and stressing less. Because that's one of the goals you have, I hope, for your students, is that they talk more and stress less. And if you happen to be a lucky teacher who gets to use Arakina as a textbook, it's really easy to agree that they don't get many opportunities to speak in meaningful ways with Arakina. And so hopefully we can change that. Even with Arakina, I used some of these techniques with that textbook, which was an amazing textbook. And I hope none of you are using it, but maybe you are. Yeah. Okay, so moving along, I need to be able to see this. Just a moment. No, that's not going to work. That might work. That's what I wanted. Thank you very much. Sorry for, okay. So some of the challenges to oral fluency. You think about it and see if I don't give you a lot of the challenges that you have encountered, put your challenge in the chat box and we'll see what we can add that to my list. Whoops. Shyness. Pronunciation hesitation. Thinking in the native language. Not enough time to get good at oral fluency. Motivation, why am I in this class anyway? Who said I had to be here? Vocabulary limitations. Students often don't have the vocabulary to speak with other people. Practice experience, they just haven't practiced because the book you're using maybe doesn't have enough oral fluency or oral language skills included. Or maybe there are others. I don't know. I mean, of course, we could brainstorm a whole series of challenges to oral fluency, but these are some of them. So information gap, who's it for? What is it? When to use it? Why to use it? How to use it? That's a lot. I don't know if we'll understand all of that. It's for all students. Everybody can use information gap activities, even the youngest students. If any of you are teaching elementary school students, your students can use this if you use pictures instead of words, if they are not literate yet. And what it is each student has part of the information and they have to share it with the other students to make a whole communication activity. That's nice, thank you. And I think this kind of activity is best after the topic has been taught, because that's when you can, during the lesson, you can teach the vocabulary or teach the grammar that's necessary. Whoops, just a moment. Whoops, okay, I got that. All right, okay. And students communicate to solve a problem or to complete a task. So I'm having a little trouble with this slide, everybody. Forgive me if this continues. It's my lack of technical skill, which is kind of funny because some people depend on me for technical skill, but there you go. All right, so the advantages of using this technique. There are advantages, and they increase student talking time. They increase student motivation. They add authentic communication situations and materials. So why do they increase? Obviously, student talking time, you can understand that. And authentic communication situations. You can also, and increasing motivation. What I wonder why they would increase motivation. Probably because students don't feel so stressed when they use these activities, because they know they don't have to have 100% of the information. They're not completely responsible. And they can be designed to focus on meaning, form, or content. So meaning is the vocabulary kind of meaning, or the communication activity. The form could be the grammar. You could be using this information gap activities to teach some grammar or to reinforce some grammar point. Or the content, it could be, the topic could be science, and you could use the information gap activity to practice some skill. And it encourages critical thinking skills and teamwork. Teamwork is really the critical part, I think, because if you get your students to work together on a goal, they will feel more empowered, I think. That's what I've always felt. And it can be an easy, simple goal, but it will empower them. So here are the few good ideas we're going to look at today. Describe and draw. This is one of my favorites. I love it. This is especially good for teaching prepositions of place, but it's also good for teaching, well, I'll tell you later. Spot the difference. Fun, always fun. Good for vocabulary. Strip sentences, strip pictures, strip stories. I love this title, strip story. It has such a good, fun image. Modified dialogues, also very, very useful. And this is my favorite, read and look up drama technique to use with modified dialogues, strip sentences, strip stories, very useful. Excuse me, and role plays. Whoops. So role plays are information gap activities that require students to really think a little bit. And they are real life activities often, and usually, and they're very good practice. So we're going to look at describe and draw. And the one is here because I'm going to show you two examples of describe and draw. So if in the first example, you model for the students. So you draw a picture on the board. You explain what you're doing while you're drawing them. So you could draw a picture of a house. We're going to see that in a minute. And you ask students to help you with vocabulary because you want to keep them involved, because your back is going to be turned to them unless you have some form of technology where you can look at them and you can draw the picture while you are looking at them, but you still want their help with vocabulary. And students, as you are explaining it, they copy the example on their own paper. And the reason for this is to just get them used to the way of doing this kind of activity. And you make a vocabulary list so that when it's their turn, they have the right words. So here's an example. I did not draw this house, but imagine that I did draw this house. And I drew it on the whiteboard or the chalkboard or some other technology where I'm looking at the students. So I would say, my house is a great big house. It has 5 windows and it has a red roof and a red chimney and a garage. The garage has 2 doors and the house has 2 doors. Now you might want to explain chimney because that might not be in their normal vocabulary. And you might want to explain shapes, and because you might want to say that the house is a rectangle. The doors are rectangles. It's up to you how you choose to do this. And you want to explain the colors, use those colors when you're describing your actions. So you have the picture, the students have the picture, the students listened to you, the students watched what you did, the students copied it. And now comes part 2, maybe. So this is part 2. Describe and draw 2. So you make a new picture, and notice this little asterisk here. And put this picture on paper. And you can make the picture a house. You should make the picture a house, but a different house. So you review the vocabulary from the lesson or any lesson, describe, and then you hold the picture and you describe it. In my picture, there is a table in the middle of the picture, and on the table there is an apple. Next to the apple is a coffee cup. So you describe the picture, and the students draw what they hear by themselves individually. And you can describe your picture 2 times, 3 times. It's up to you, but keep your picture very simple. And when it's over, you compare pictures, and you laugh a lot because the pictures are sometimes quite silly looking. I've done this with a picture of a table many times, and my table has tall legs, but many of the students make tables with short legs, and my apple is small, and many students make tall, big apples and the coffee cup size. So it makes for a fun time. Now that asterisk, you need to keep your picture secret. So is the person drawing the picture only the teacher? No, it could be the student also. You could put 2 students together, and student A could draw the picture in advance and explain it or describe it to student B, and student B could draw the picture, and then you could reverse roles and give student B the job of describing a picture for student A. And this is a really good activity for prepositions of place. But this also leads to the describe part leads to things like giving directions with a map. And so you can extend this to things like giving directions with a map. And here's some variations. Students or teachers use pictures with different images. You can bring pictures. You don't have to draw them in advance. You can use pictures that give directions, or that are pictures of locations, or pictures of animals. You could have students draw pictures of animals, or pictures of things, or pictures of people. And you could share with a single partner or a group. Individual students, if they're really talented, they could teach the whole class. It's a very empowering experience for the students who are brave enough to teach the whole class. And it's a lot of fun. So I got this from the American English State resources, which you can access also. So it's not something that's just for people like me. It's for people like you. Okay, now we're going to spot the difference. So students work with a partner to find, this is one way you can use spot the difference. Students work with a partner to find differences together. So 2 students have 2 pictures. Or students work with a partner to find differences, and each student has a different picture. So then they have to talk more. In the first example, the students are comparing the 2 pictures. They are side by side. But in the second example, the students have different pictures that they should keep private, and they need to ask questions. And I didn't put this on the PowerPoint presentation, but the questions should begin with yes, no questions. So if I have a picture and my picture is coming up, black line pictures are very easy. I'll show you what I mean here. And provide vocabulary in advance if it's necessary. So if it's something that the students have never encountered before, you need to give them the vocabulary in advance. And I got this from one of my favorite websites. This is the ISL Collective. It's a European-based website, and it is really wonderful. I'm going to show you, I hope I'm going to show you some of this later on. Okay, so these spot the difference pictures can be very simple, like this. So you see, this is just a black line drawing. And in this picture, there is a clock. So if you are student A, you would say to student B, does your picture have a clock? And student B would say, no. So student A immediately will mark the clock. And then student B could say, does your picture have a bear, a stuffed animal bear? And student A would say, no. And on and on and on until you discover how many differences there are in the picture. And then when you're finished, you compare the pictures. By the way, this should be cut in half so that student A is only looking at one picture and student B is only looking at the other picture. Or they can be complex. These pictures can be complex. And this next one I'm going to show you is extremely complex. And it's a little bit hard to see, I know, but the idea is that this is one picture outside and this is one picture outside, and they're almost the same, but things like the sun are different. And there's a lot of differences. The flowers are different. But what's interesting about this one, and you can get this at the ILS cooperative, or the one I just showed you. And what's interesting is that student A would be asking student B questions. How many flowers are in the picture? And I can't read all of these, but anyhow, you get the idea. And in this case, the student would be asking, this would be an ing form, present progressive form. The birds are flying in the sky, or the birds fly in the sky. It could be simple present. So this is very complex. I can't imagine how I would use it with both sets of questions, but still it could be used. It's a very interesting idea. Okay, so now, what's next? Nothing. Strip stories. Strip stories are my favorite. I used them the first day I was at the Tajik, at the Pedagogical Institute in 2017. The teacher whose room I was in was telling the story or reviewing the story of 3 men in a boat. And I'd never heard the story before. And I was like, oh, how could you get the students to talk? So I had a tablet with unlined paper, and I looked at the story carefully while I was in the classroom, and I came up with, I don't know, 15 important key features of the story and made strip story from that. I cut it all up. I asked the teacher if I could have 15 minutes at the end, and I gave the students the strip stories for 3 men in a boat, and it worked. It was not so perfect, but it worked. So it's great for reading and speaking review activities. I know the students thought that activity was a lot more fun than reading the whole story. So it can be used with a story or a sentence, any story pretty much, or any sentence. Students must collaborate and problem solve together. students with different skill levels work together. So if you're careful when you do this, when you do any of these activities, you should make sure to not put all of the strong students together. Put strong students and weaker students together so they can support each other. Because the weaker students might have language weaknesses or be less skilled with language, but they might have other strengths that the strong student needs. So yeah, the strong student bring up the weak. Now, these are some of the language transition words you might need for strip stories. You might need to teach them to pay attention to these transition words. Therefore, for example, nevertheless, and all of these, first, next, then, last, finally, and after that, and many more. So this is from this website, which is from New Zealand. And they also tell you on this website the language that students need for interaction for this. For example, they need to say things like, I think my sentence is first because it says blah, blah, blah. Or they could say, I think John's sentence is first because it sounds like blah, blah, blah. And so this is a very useful website that will tell you about the language to use when you make your students do strip stories. Okay, they could look like this. This is a strip sentence. So you could just, if your students are very beginners, you could just cut this up into 2 sentences and you'd have 4 students trying to make this a sentence. It doesn't look very hard, but if you're a beginner, it could be quite hard. So you could also have strip story pictures. And you could use these pictures with very beginner students, or you could use them with advanced students, because you could ask the advanced students to actually make detailed stories, detailed explanations about these pictures. And so that's another possibility. Or they could look like this. This is just a story, The Dog and His Shadow, and this is for 8 students. So you take each sentence and you cut it. So that's why it's a strip of paper. And the student, in the most gentle presentation of this, the student gets the paper and gets to keep the paper. When you think they're capable, you could give them the paper and then give them 2 minutes to memorize their sentence and then collect all the papers. The reason you might want to do this is because students tend to secretly share their papers, and then that changes the whole dynamic of the exercise. So these are different kinds of strip stories. I've attached some at the end, and you can virtually turn any story into a strip story. You don't need to use all the words in the story. You just need to use the key points. And that's what's so much fun about it. And the students need to, when they do this, they really need to communicate. Okay, so next comes dialogues. In traditional textbook dialogues, students stand up and read from their text. The key word there is read. Students see all parts of the text. So they see speaker A and speaker B. And students usually don't make eye contact, because if this is my textbook, look at what I look like when I'm pretending to read a traditional dialogue. Hello, my name is Jane. Hello, my name is Mary. Did you see the top of my head? Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It's a nice color. I like it too. But it's not as good as this. this is much better. This tells, looking at somebody's face tells you so much more than this, right? And so traditional dialogues are lacking in that students are reading and that students can see the whole conversation, which is not a normal dialogue. In a normal dialogue, you only know the part you're going to say. So students are not challenged to listen. They're not listening at all. They're just looking at the page to think, okay, I got to say the next line. And really, they rarely remember anything. That's my experience. Okay, so here's a dialogue. A dialogue for beginners could look like this, right? Easy, could look like this. Where's Walter? He's in the kitchen. What's he doing? He's eating breakfast. Okay, so that, you know, for a beginner, and all the information is in the picture too, right? So that's very helpful, but still it's too easy. So you can modify dialogues in several ways. One is to provide more options for the students. And I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. The student is forced to listen if they have more than one choice to answer. You can scramble both parts of the dialogue. That's a fun way to do it. Or you can remove some of the words in each part to allow students to add their own words. And in all of these cases, the partner has to listen very carefully. Here's an example of fixing that easy. Let's change Walter's dialogue a little bit. So imagine this is 2 pieces of paper. Where's Walter? Ah, look at this. He's in the kitchen. Or you could say he's in the car. And if you don't have the picture of the person in the kitchen with this dialogue, both answers are acceptable. And this could be the, if your B speaker says he's in the car, then this is the correct next question. Not, well, you could also say this too, but probably not. And he's eating breakfast would be the answer to this. What's he doing? But now as I'm speaking to you, I realize it could also be the answer to this, or the question for this. So, but you get the idea. If you add more information, it becomes more complex and the students need to listen. Or you can mix up the order. So this is a different dialogue, but it starts like this. What are you doing now? And this is not the answer. All right, call me later then. This is not the answer. You want to do something? This is the answer. I'm watching TV. And so then this is not the answer to C. This is the answer to C. What are you watching? So in this case, you see the speakers have to listen carefully and they have to look at their text. Of course, this is also going to be 2 pieces of paper. So for this example, all the connections are here in the key. So number 1 goes to C, C goes to number 3, 3 goes to D, D goes to 5, and on and on and on. But this would not be for beginner students, but certainly it's a useful activity for advanced students. Okay, now add some drama to your class. Read and look up method. I'm firmly committed to this method for any dialogue you ever have to use. So read and look up is a drama technique. Looks like we're going to run out of time. And what you do is you read and listen with your mouth shut. You speak and listen with your eyes on your partner. So you only do these things when you're looking at your partner. And you only do these things when your mouth is shut. There's no need to memorize. And you can read again as much as necessary. And you only read when it's your turn to talk. So I can't show you an example. I was going to have my husband pretend a conversation with me and use read and look up, but something happened and that didn't happen. Okay, so role play. Role play is acting. It's fun, it's creative, it's authentic, and there are many, many, many resources online. You can create resources from your textbooks. They help develop confidence in students. They provide vocabulary practice. And here's an example of a role play in a restaurant. So I would separate these out. But imagine you have the server standing up and the customer sitting down at a table, and the server comes in and says, "What can I get you?" And the customer says, "I'll have a," and the server doesn't know what the customer is going to say. But he says, "Sure, anything to drink?" And he says, "Yes, I'll have a." And if the server doesn't want, the server can also say, "I'm sorry, we're out of that today," or something like that. So you can make this more real. Anyhow, oh, we are getting to the end, but not as quickly. So I made this Padlet to include websites or documents that could give you more ideas for these information gap activities. I hope they're helpful. We're going to look at the very end and then come back to the Padlet because I think we're going to run out of time. These are the resources basically that I used. The American English at State or whatever, you can see it there. The ISL Collective and ESL Activity. Oh, and I didn't put the one for the New Zealand one. But, and then my last here, but we're not done yet. So don't go away. Whoops. All right, here we go. I hope this works. Yes, it worked. Imagine that. Imagine that technology. Okay, so these resources are here. These are printable resources that can give you things like cards, not index cards, flashcard kind of cards. But on these cards, you can put a picture on one card and a word on another card, and you can have the students try and match the picture and the word. You could make them walk around the room to do that. You can, for example, this one, I'll show, if I can open this up. Ooh, we didn't test this out. So this says it's for grade 1, but I do not believe that. But imagine if you have these, you cut these up and you give each student one, this is like an answer, and one question, and make sure that it's not the same question that goes with the answer. And you tell the students to wander around the room and they have to say to students, "I have a landlord. I have the landlord." And they have to say, "Who has the person who helps you with the money at the bank?" And in that case, they have to find the other person. So you can make this with these kind of websites. These have the ISL Collective is really, really useful. And this one, I want to point out to you because I just so love this one. Okay, kids, forget about that word. Just forget about that. And so right here, worksheets. You would never know this. I can't believe I found this one day. Anyhow, you get 6 words. But the best thing about this, I think, is that you can make a spinner. And a spinner can get your students talking. You could put WH questions. What is the weather like today? What kind of clothes do you wear when it's cold? I think this was weather words. Yes. You can make how did you feel in the last storm? You can make questions that go with the spinner to get them talking more. Okay, so that's my favorite. Okay, so there's skits here, there's conversation cards here. These are just a million questions you can have the students look at. Dialogues, more conversation cards, icebreaker ideas, jigsaw activities, which are at what I told you, one of my favorite websites, the ISL Collective. So these are going to be very small, but notice please that there are more than 5 pages of these things. And what they look like here is a picture, and you have to fill in all the blanks by asking questions. Sometimes they're very easy, and they're very hard sometimes. So here's one about job opportunities. Okay, lots of these things. There's ESL role plays. This is a whole book. And there was another book that I put here. Let's see. Something that I made. Yeah, I don't know where it is. Maybe I didn't put it here. Anyhow, this is a fun skit that you could, after you master the practice of reading and looking up. This is the true story of Cinderella. So these are serious words, but it could be lots of fun. So these are all the characters that you have. And that's a whole bunch. You could have a whole bunch of students in the class doing this. And this is not the only one. There's a lot of other stories that are modified, that are fixed, that are the true stories. And I think maybe I am nearly done, and you are welcome to ask me questions now if you have questions. Can I answer them or not? I don't know, but I will try. I forgot how this part's going to go. Oh, let's see. Can I look at the questions? Yes, there are 12. Thanks for the resources. It's really good and useful. Seems easy. Yeah, I think it's very easy with limited resources, because in many cases, all you need is a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen. And they really do get students to talk more. And that is one of your goals in life, I hope. It's always one of my goals. How do you teach speaking online with adult students? Any activities you may suggest? Well, you can do these things online with adult students. They're a little bit more complicated, but if you give them an assignment in advance, so you have, let's say you have 10 students in your class. You probably don't, but 10 is a nice number to work with. So before the class, you send an email message to 2 groups of 5 students each. And in group 1, you give them all part A of the conversation. And in group 2, you give them all part B of the conversation. And then when they're with you, you very carefully have to partner them in the breakout room. And it works. I've tried it. It's a little bit cumbersome. It's a little bit complicated for you, but it does work, and they do get to figure it out. I think the first time they struggle online, just as they will struggle in the classroom, because it's a very weird thing to do, to only have part of the story. But it works. I think you should try it. Is that it? Let's see. No, there's a whole bunch. So thank you for joining. Please write your good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yes. Yes. Information gap promotes and enhances communication. It makes activities more interesting. I agree. Okay, we already looked at that. I don't know if I've given you a complete answer, but it's the best one I can think of. You can find yes, you can find resources at americanstate.gov. It's an incredibly wealthy resource. Americanstate.gov you should make sure to look at it regularly. Yes, information gap promotes cooperation. You're welcome for the resources. And I guess I speeded through too quickly. We can go back and look at more of the Padlet. But listen, if you want to ask me any questions or give me any ideas, you can contact me at this address, janegeorge1@mac.com. And I will do my best to help you find an answer to any of your problems related to English teaching. That's all I can do. I can't do anything else. And maybe I could talk to you about cats, but that's about it. Yeah. So that is about it. But we can go back and look. If you have no questions, we can look at more of these things. Whoops. What is one of my favorites? Let's see. Well, we can look at this. So this, I only found this recently, but it is quite, whoops, where is it? Right here. Okay. So, well, this is not it. All right, I'll have to amend this. Okay, oh, here it is, conversation cards. So if you can see this, now you can. This is about New Year's. So it's still possible to use this, New Year conversation cards. What do you normally do to celebrate New Year? What do you like, or do you like to go to New Year parties? What sort of food do you normally eat at the New Year? Do you think it's sensible to celebrate the New Year? What's the best New Year party you've ever been to? Now, you could use this now because it's the calendar New Year, or you could wait and use it for Nowruz. Why not? Because the same questions would apply. But that's for student A, and this is for student B. When is the New Year celebrated in your country? So this would give you the answer of Nowruz. Is the New Year an important holiday? Yeah. Where do you normally go for the New Year? Are there special traditions? So this is not intended for students exactly from the same country, but you could still use it. And there are millions of these questions right here. So there are millions of them, maybe not millions, but here are the topics: banking, doctors, all of these, weather, clothing, sports, and it's conversation, questions to get you to conversation, to make conversations. So that's really good. And let me show you another one of my favorite. Right here. Okay, persuasive role play. I'm sorry, I cannot tell you where I borrowed this from, but so you have an audition to join a famous orchestra. You desperately need to rehearse, and so you've stayed home to get in some solid practicing. Then there's a knock on the door and a neighbor is complaining. This is the neighbor. You are ill and have a terrible headache, so you've stayed home to recover. You are outraged to find your noisy neighbor in the flat above is playing their loud and noisy musical instrument over and over. You go to complain. So this is a very free form role play, but it could certainly happen. What you could do with this, in this case, is you could use this as an example to map out the conversation for the students. So together you could map out the conversation. So you could put this on the board, and you could, or give them a copy of the A and B, and you could say, okay, so what does student B, who talks first? That's the first question. Who talks first? I think it might be B, because B is outraged. That means extremely angry. And so then you ask them, what would this person say? And everybody writes it down. And then student A, what would that person say? And you could guide them through making a conversation. And then you could give them one of these to try on their own. Again, part B and part A are on separate papers. They don't get to see the other person's part. And you could have them recorded on their phone. You could listen to it later, or they could play it for the whole class to listen to. They're very much fun, role play. And this book has loads and loads of role play activities. And let's see, Reader's Theater is something we didn't talk about, but it's an extension of role play. And there are millions of, maybe not millions, but lots of scripts here. Now, some of these, this page here says it's for primary students, but I don't think that's true. I know that I have used very, very young Reader's Theater activities with adults. And the thing is that it's fun and they love it and it's fun. I mean, you can't go that low, but it is fun. And they will have fun. If you play it, if you introduce it correctly, you can use children's role plays or Reader's Theater with adults, but make sure you have them. Let's look at this one. Make sure, if we can, make sure you have them use the read and look up method, because the read with my page right here is terrible. It does not foster communication. Okay, so if the narrator is not a strong student, the narrator might say, remember, he only speaks when he's looking up. He might go, on a bright sunny day, Chicken Little was picking up corn in the barnyard. Suddenly, an acorn fell from the big oak tree. It fell down and hit him. Nope, it hit Chicken Little right on the top of his head. Kerplop. So it's okay if the narrator or any character looks back a million times. It's really okay. And in fact, that leads to better communication, because I know, and you know from your experience, when you're not looking at the person who's talking to you, you can't hear them as well. Just a thought. Okay, it looks like there's a couple more questions in the chat. Let's see if we can conjure those up. No, we can't. We have to go over here and conjure this back up. And let's see. Can information gap activities be used to improve written communication too? Actually, yes, I think they can. And so you can have the students collaborate on a story. So they can each have part of the background for a story. So maybe student A has the background for the setting of the story, and student B has the background for the characters of the story. And so they have to talk about it, right? And they only have part of the information. And after they talk about it, you can have them each write a story on their own. And then after they've finished writing it, they can compare their stories, and I bet they will laugh because their stories will be different. And yeah, so that I think is a very doable thing. So another question is, best teaching resources methodology you used during the pandemic? Well, truth be told, I will not lie to you. I retired in 2019, and I have not been so, I've not had to suffer to teach distance learning through the pandemic. Last year, I taught some teachers in Lebanon with the computer via Zoom, and it was quite challenging. But I did a lot of these activities with them. I would send them in groups like I explained before. I would send group 1 part A and group 2 part B, and ask them to then, in the Zoom meeting, I would send them to breakout rooms based on that. And that worked a lot. That worked well. I also used one thing that surprised me with these teachers, and it worked really well, was something that we didn't talk about today, but it's called jazz chants. And if you have never used jazz chants, I highly recommend that you look up the topic jazz chants, because it will help your students with pronunciation. It will help them with rhythm. And in my experience with these teachers last year, the teachers had so much fun creating their own jazz chants that I think that it would help you to give this task to your students. But because I haven't had to teach remotely, I'm not up to date on all the fancy schmancy new apps and new programs that are available. I'm sorry. I'm a failure on that, but I hope you'll forgive me for not being up to date. Anyhow, I think we're almost out of time. I don't know exactly how this is going to end, but thank you very much for your patience with me. And I hope that you can stay safe. Don't do foolish things during this pandemic. Wear a mask. That's what they're telling us in the US all the time. And if and when you can get vaccinated, it seems that's the next best thing to do after a mask. And please get vaccinated. I hope you can. And I really look forward to someday coming back to see all of you in person and work with you in person, because as you will agree, in person is much better than distance. Anyhow, if you have no more, okay, go.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
No, I was going to say no more questions. Aloha.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane, for such nice presentation. So let me remind our audience that today we hosted Jane George, who talked about gap activities, information gap activities to increase student speaking skills. And on behalf of the whole English Without Borders network, let me convey the words of gratitude to you, Jane. And thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for sharing your presentation. And of course, we'll be just posting all the materials of the webinar on English Without Borders website very soon for easy access of teachers to those materials. And dear audience, thank you for being with us, and please stay tuned on us, and wishing everybody to have a wonderful evening. Please keep in mind that we are having Thursday webinars every Thursday, and next week we are waiting for you to join the webinar. And everybody, please enjoy your day, Jane, and stay connected with us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.